Alrighty, I'm just waiting on the screen. I think y'all can see us now. Hello, everyone. Alrighty. Welcome back to Worldbuilders Weekly. Today I apparently didn't mute my phone very well, so I'm just gonna throw that across the room. I hope y'all are well today. Welcome back. Come hang out with a couple of Greek geeks every week. You can get some updates on our marketplace, trivia, some nerdy tangents, and sometimes, if we're lucky, we have a special guest like today. Welcome, CR Saxon.
Hello.
Yeah, last week y'all helped us raise over $1 million. So what the heck? That's amazing. Very excited. This is our last Worldbuilders Weekly of the year. We won't be here next week. So thanks everyone who's stopping by, and we'll see you again in 2021. Let's start off with a couple of trivia questions. This is last week's, so if you have an inkling to take a guess, please do, but don't feel pressured. Last week's Trivia Tuesday, after World War II, Heifer International sent livestock to families in Europe. More than 7,000 men and women accompanied the shipments of livestock. What was the name given to the people who cared for the animals during their journey? This one is a funny name. Do you want to take a guess?
I swear I've heard it before, but it's not coming to me.
They call them the seagoing cowboys.
That's what it was.
So if anybody has heard of that or guessed it right, congratulations. You were entered into the drawing that we do for our monthly drawing for trivia. So next week's question, as you all know, please answer these in the DMs, not in the chat or on our public social media. And you can answer these in any of our social media sites. We keep an eye on all of them. So next week, Trivia Tuesday. After making his way through a wardrobe in Narnia, literary character Edmund meets a queen who gives him something hot to drink and whatever he wishes to eat. What is the name of the sweet treat he requests? I love the Narnia books. I couldn't answer that off the top of my head, I don't think. It's been a while since I've read those.
I'm like, I remember him mentioning a sweet, but for the life of me, I couldn't possibly name it.
Yeah. Well, if any of you know, please put them in the DMs and get into our prizes for trivia. All right. So moving on to our very special guests. Thank you again for being here. I have on my interviewer voice.
Yay. Thank you for having me. It's a huge honor. Since I first heard about Worldbuilders, I've loved everything that you guys do. And so it's really sweet to be here.
Thank you so much. So I'll just kind of start off a little bit about what well, first of all, I guess I'll talk about your book very briefly behind closed doors. We have just a tiny kind of intro here. It kind of starts out, it says, stories about socially outcasted superhero teens saving the world comes a dime a dozen, but what happens after the world is saved? And what does being put in such a situation do to a hero? Genius inventor Ferdinand Samoltz, I've read it in my head 100 times now, not out loud, just saved the world. Only doing so broke him. But life goes on, kind of. At the very least, he's trying to act like it does. So we kind of talked briefly about how your book, while it doesn't feature sex or swearing, it still deals with some really adult themes. It has some heavy and potentially triggering topics. Your book, it's labeled there. It has topics dealing with suicidal ideation, neglect, PTSD, depression, disordered eating, abuse, etc. So I guess my first question going off that is, why this story? Why is this the one?
so many answers to that for different reasons, but in media, quite often enough, it'll take these heavy topics and Hollywoodize them. And it makes them these big, fantastic things, and they never really address it in a realistic or helpful way. But even before the pandemic hit, these were issues that a lot of teens and young adults were facing regularly. And so I wanted to have a story where these can be addressed in a way that don't just make it fun to watch and don't just say this is what like this is information about it, but actually shows the reader what it's like, both seeing the person from the outside and seeing what they're thinking and feeling inside, to gain an understanding, which is quite different than just knowledge, as well as maybe develop a little more empathy, as well as for those who are suffering through these things, that they can stop and think, okay, maybe I'm not the only one. It's like someone else feels this way, someone else understands this, and it might give them hope. And so,
That's wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, again, like I guess there's no wrong answer, but I mean, the characters are written in a way that I think that empathy is super easy to grasp onto. Without being invasive, are these themes that you've I guess how did you kind of come about all of these specific themes? Were they things you had to like heavily research? Are they things that you've had to experience or know people who've experienced them?
a little bit of all of the above. I have experienced a number of these, and I've known a lot of people who have, especially while getting my degree, which is I have my master's in clinical psychology. And so that gave me the deeper knowledge and ability to interact with people who've had to suffer through these things and find healing, to gain a little bit deeper understanding to hopefully be able to impart that to other people. And so it's never fun. Healing isn't easy, but um, I still had to do a ton of research because I've experienced some of them and I know people who have, they didn't necessarily fit the personalities or the backgrounds of the characters. And so I'm like, okay, how would this particular thing affect a teenage guy? How would this affect, a little girl? How would this affect? And just kind of look and really make sure I understood the different levels that impact people before going into this to try and make it as helpful as possible.
Yeah, there's kind of this uh uh sorry, I have 800 every time now that you've mentioned it, I have 800 things I want to ask. Uh but you said you have a degree in psychology. Um this is your first book that you've released this year. Kind of how did those two things like interlude? So you felt like you had to kind of represent these, tell these stories. Um, I guess when it comes to the way that you experience the book, for me as a reader, you write with these beautiful kind of prose.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
it's like these gesture blocks, and there's also this kind of voice in Ferdinand's head, that follows him along. Can you kind of talk about the writing style and then just the way that you kind of incorporated everything in that?
So I really enjoy being able to hear and see the thoughts and feelings of the different characters, which is why there's like a million different scenes with different points of view. But like how we all think a little differently, our minds all work a little differently. And if you've ever experienced, especially like depression to the point of suicide, sometimes anxiety and other various things where it just feels like there's this inner voice inside you that's separate from your own mind and you can sit there and just argue back and forth with it. That's a little bit, I guess it's kind of, sorry, my brain is, but yeah, so I wanted to represent that both in a way because some people will actually have that break off and it feels like it's his own personality that you're fighting against, and other people it just stays with this constantly just talking themselves down thing. And so you get to see a little bit of both of that with Ferdinand. Uh, I think I got off trail somewhere.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think even at a very basic level, I have some pretty crippling every once in a while anxiety. And while it's not like a voice that's out of my control, it's sometimes kind of, your thoughts bring you to another place. So it's kind of nice to, or not nice, but it's relatable to watch the character, kind of acknowledge it, grip it, and then do their best to resist it.
Yeah, so he's trying so hard because like he knows it's there, and he honestly does believe that what it's saying is true. Like he's like, yes, I am this horrible person. I did these terrible things that you say I did. But at the same time, it's like no one can know, no one can see. I have to keep this facade, which is another thing that a lot of people are really good at who are suffering through these things. Like you can meet them and be talking to them every day and never know what's going on inside their head. And so it's kind of a little bit of both of that, just the need for this facade and the just whether it's right or wrong, the knowledge that this part of you that's always kind of talking down to you and telling you all these horrible things that you are is something you can believe at the same time. So it's
And then also just we also mentioned a little bit about this. Um, with all of these pretty heavy topics, the book also does not feature like sex or swearing. Can you talk a little bit to that as well?
so that has a lot to do with the world building. In this world, it's like 7 millennia in the future. It is so far removed from the societies and the cultures that we know now. And yet, because humanity never seems to learn, they kind of just keep on cycling back into a similar enough societies that it doesn't feel too horribly alien. Um, and so I took kind of like how every now and then a really strong group will rise up and they're like, this is what's acceptable. This is what we want. This is what we don't want. And so within the history timeline, like couple millennia from now, a really powerful group came up and decided these things are proper and these things are improper. And everything that was improper or somehow related to something that was improper was just destroyed, and they were able to reshape societies and beliefs and cultures just by destroying all the histories and all of just what was normal before and inserting their own normal. And so from there it's like, oh, well, if improper speech, like, so what's improper speech? It's like, oh, well, swearing, you should be able to talk without swearing. You hear a lot of people, or you hear some people say that, it's like if you can't express yourself without swearing, then you don't know enough, or you're not eloquent enough, or whatnot. Even though, arguments either way. So someone took that and they're like, okay, swearing is just wrong. We destroy everyone or everything that has been destroyed, every source of media and song and whatnot that uses swearing or talks about other improper things is just destroyed. It no longer exists. And it just kind of developed to the point where they managed to keep these embedded in society as the norm for so long that language just evolved to not use those expletives anymore. And they don't even really have other things to replace them. Like it's not like, oh, what in the world? It's just why, And so people are able to find other ways to express themselves because of this thing or what this group decided to do. And that is also it was that same group that also caused for mental illness and other undesirable things to talk about. It's like, no, 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 these just don't exist. And if they do exist, then you're wrong, and we have to get rid of that. And that's part of Ferdinand's like fear. And so like there's a lot of just little things where it's like, okay, that's doesn't seem too off, but still doesn't quite seem there. And it's kind of just trying to make it as the normal part of the society. And so, and same with like sex, it's like, oh, well, sexualizing children is improper. And so anything that would do that's like, don't talk about boyfriend, girlfriend, you don't talk about couples, you're just like, you don't worry about it until you're getting ready for marriage. And so in that society for children who are at a boarding school, it's just like, we're not, this isn't, you just don't talk about it. It's kind of just not there. And it kind of forces them to focus on other things because that's what they're trained socially to do. So it's kind of a commentary on how much society both allows and disallows what we think and want to express even today, and just kind of took that to a little bit more of an extreme.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I we had a really nice question from the chat.
Oh,
Somebody asked you, was this book written during the pandemic? If it wasn't, has your perspective on the idea of persistent trauma changed during 2020?
so it was not. I actually started the series about 9 years ago, and I've written the entire series. It just needs to be cleaned up now. And when I'd finally gotten this, where it's like, okay, someone's picking it up, it's finally going to be published, and then the pandemic hit, and I was just like, oh no. It's like, no, 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 I should not actually be seeing this in real life. I was hoping this would be more of an extreme example. But I do know that trauma happens every day. It's just different. Like it's a lot more personal and a lot more quiet. Whereas now, since this pandemic, with how many people are being affected, it's no longer quiet. And so we see more of it. And that's both, I mean, it's bad because so many people are suffering, but it's also good because it's allowing people or allowing society to see just how much this affects individuals and communities. Um, Trauma will always be something we have to deal with, but if we can make this a more open conversation topic and actually think about what to do as a group to help and to fix what we can, it can really improve society and make life a whole lot better for everyone. Which is kind of part of why I wrote the series the way I did, is I wanted it to be a way of helping. And so um, I do wish though that it that a pandemic that's affected tens of millions of people wasn't happening at all though.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, I agree with you though. I want to validate that we've had a lot of discussions about how we hope that if anything, there's a more successful line of communication that everyone can kind of express themselves and what they're going through, whether that's like setting boundaries or saying like I need this type of space or I need more, connection. And it would be really nice to think that when we kind of return to normal, there's kind of this more allowance, especially when it comes to like mental illness or people struggling, mentally. But
yeah,
yeah,
mentally.
I am, yeah, and emotionally, right. I'm curious, was there a point where I might be incorrect? Did your book come out in November of 2020, or
Yeah,
was
like
it before that?
yeah, it was the beginning of November. It was like the day after elections it went live, and so that was nice to
Oh
distract me
wow.
from all that chaos. I'm like, okay, I can focus on this instead. This is wonderful.
Is there at any point where you thought like you wanted that maybe you would like push it to another year, given that we've had kind of like this struggle? Like what made you kind of move forward anyways?
It was a hard choice because I'm like, it was all these things, especially if you pay close attention to the various flashbacks and intrusive thoughts that Ferdinand has, there's a lot of similarities in what was experienced before this book started and what happened in 2020, including, world leaders not listening and people just fighting for the bare minimum to try and stop this, and, you know, people that you love seeing them suffer and all that. And part of me thought, well, maybe this isn't the right time. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, sometimes it's important to see that and normalize the fact that, yes, you've suffered and yes, you're hurting and it's okay. And here are characters who are suffering and hurting, and some are trying to hide it, and some are just accepting help and doing what they can to embrace it. And it's showing you the effects it's having both on those characters and how they are handling it, as well as the people around them based on how they're handling it. As I was hoping it could, in some way, maybe inspire others to reach out and get the help they need in whatever way works for them.
Yeah. I mean, it is very prevalent, the topic, especially considering like what Ferdinand did. The book, right away kind of addresses this virus or this sickness. What kind of led you to take it from this standpoint of essentially like this hero who saved the world and then is dealing with these problems? Was it just like that kind of became the most efficient way to discuss these topics, or I'm just curious.
Actually, so we all love the superhero super teen saves the world, but it's like I always got um I guess not necessarily tired, but a little disappointed that no one ever looked at this realistically from a psychological, emotional, or social standpoint. It's like, okay, the socially outcasted kid always has like two best friends he can rely on, but that's not what a social outcast would have. And there's a lot of people who don't have those two best friends. And, they would like to be able to see a story where they could be part of it. And, they go out and they save the world, but they, end smelling like roses and walking off into the sunset with a love interest. But, if you're socially outcasted, awkward, and whatnot, you don't have time to look for a love interest or even know how to go about that while you're trying to save the world and you're stressed out and all these things. And so it's like, it seems like we're been telling children, like kids, teens, children for so long. It's like, oh, if you just have this ability, you'll be able to go through and do anything and come out just fine. And that's not true. It's like you can be strong, you can be super smart, you can have, you know, a level of understanding or ability beyond the other people around you, but you're still a human and it's okay to be affected like a person would be affected. It's like it doesn't matter if you can fly, you'll still be hurt just as bad as a normal person just because you have a heart of flesh. And I kind of wanted to show that to kids. It's like, yes, just because you're not a superhero or thinking you're a superhero, life would be better. It's not necessarily that. And it's important to find um, your own way to, or like your own way to be you and to accept when you're not okay. And so, like, I guess try to just kind of normalize it instead of always making it this flowery Hollywood thing, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it totally does. And just to add to that, we've put in the chat, a link to your book, for anyone wondering. It is heavy themes, but it's written in a style of like a young adult fiction. And I think that these topics are written in a way that they're super graspable. That's not a word, probably.
I understand what you mean, though.
You can
I make up
grasp.
words all the time.
Yeah, you can grasp the topics really easily, and I think that again, the kind of writing style, the characters are easily relatable, easily accessible. Anyone who is in the chat, please go in and give the book a read. You also have a YouTube channel. I
Yes.
was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that for us.
So, like, on my channel, mostly I read the book. It's like one section at a time because I'm doing all the images and recording and editing and all that by myself. But so many people have been negatively impacted this year that, you know, getting a book is just not an option. It's like they would be happy just to know that where they're getting their next meal. And, you know, that with how important and essential reading is just for your mind, for relaxing, for education, just for everything, I wanted to make my book or my story available to those who, being able to get a book is just not going to happen. Or even just for those like, I'm not sure I want to buy it, but I am curious, so let's see. And so I did it and put it up there just for anyone who wants to listen. You have to deal with my voice and I stutter and I'm not the best orator, but it's there. It also gave me another medium to show my characters because like I'm not super descriptive on describing every little detail of each character because I always found that kind of annoying when I read. But then it's like I can show you. It's like, okay, so here's John's family. It's like when I describe a family of giants, what does that mean? And so you can see the proportions of that and whatnot. And so, but yeah, mostly it's there for anyone who just wants to see. I do a couple of other book reviews as I'm able to get to them. It's just kind of fun.
No, I mean, I think, at Worldbuilders kind of brand, I think we really appreciate anytime an author takes a step to create like accessibility. Um, and as you said, these are some pretty important topics, especially given the year. Uh, I was wondering, you did mention, so you have a degree in psychology. You started this book kind of 9 years ago. Um, would
Well, I
that have
started the
been,
series 9 years ago. I've written all 9 books in that time.
would you, would that have been at kind of the beginning of your psychology degree? How did this kind of morph as you kind of went through the series?
So I had finished my degree when this book started in its current form. I'd actually, during grad school, I was writing something that was similar, kind of. It had a number of the same characters. And then, um, sorry, throat's getting dried out. Then, I was just about to graduate and I was in this wreck that did not good things to my brain. And so when I went back to start working on the story and whatnot, it just didn't make sense anymore. So I'm like, okay, let's just really focus on this instead of as a stress relief while I'm in school, as something that can actually help people. And so it was from there that it really started to morph and change into this, what was supposed to be a one book into a full series. And I tried to make it as accessible and realistic and showing just as much of healing and suffering and trauma that I can or that I could in a way that wasn't off-putting or preachy. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all appreciate that. It's a way to kind of step away from like an academic take on things, hopefully to reach like more people. Not that we don't love academia.
it's like, no, education is wonderful, whatever form you do, whether it's training or degrees
Mhm.
in science or whatnot. But it's important to be able to take that knowledge that you've gained and make it something that people can understand, that, anybody can understand, regardless of where they're at in life and their own understanding and knowledge base. Because if you can't do that, then you're not being very helpful to people outside yourself. So,
And if I can ask, did you independently release this book then?
kind of,
Was it an independent publication, I mean?
um, sort of, there's this little publishing group type thing. It's really small, and they pretty much help you through self-publishing in a way. They are listed as a publisher. I love them to death. They're HCS, and they um, look for books that are unusual and definitely aren't in the norm, and then they help the authors with the editing and the formatting and everything to get it up on Amazon and available to everyone. So it's kind of something halfway between independent and regular publishing.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, because sometimes it's nice for our audience to kind of hear, especially people that had to go about a process kind of on their own a little bit, what that process is like. So, yeah, I mean, if you could, or like, do you plan on continuing to do it this way, or?
Probably. I know that like the traditional publishers didn't really want to give my story a chance because it was, heavy and it wasn't a guaranteed success. It wasn't something that like, yes, the large majority of people are going to love this. It was too much of a gamble, I guess. But I is like, because this group is so wonderful, I would continue to work with them and get all my um, books out unless for some reason someone else offered something really nice. And it's not even so much to go to a traditional publisher, but just having access to more people and possibly the ability to do more good. As it is, it's kind of just I'm dependent on word of mouth, and hopefully people will love it and stumble upon it. But yeah, being a really small publisher, independent's kind of just in that realm. It's whoever I happen to reach are the people who will get to read it, and I would like it to be available to as many people to help as many people as possible. So
Yeah, I mean, I find it unfortunate in that kind of framework that it's a book that people don't want to take a chance on. I feel like those themes are kind of it's I think it's silly for publishers sometimes to take a take that's somehow less relatable than someone fighting a dragon or something like
yeah, or it's
that.
like, oh, here's another space opera. Here's
Right. I do keep putting chat to Amazon, or I'm sorry, a link to Amazon in the chat. Is that the preferred place you want people to find your book, or is there a different link that you get that you prefer people go through?
That's the main place. It's available in paperback and on Kindle. Kindle is definitely a lot less expensive, so um, hopefully one day I can get it out as an audiobook as well. But for the most part, it's pretty much just available there on Amazon.
And as you
Yeah.
kind of go through to release the next books, you know, you said you've written out a whole series. Did you? How long is it?
Oh, it's 8 books in the series, which shows various aspects of the healing process, including a lot of the issues that a lot of people find themselves up against as they're trying to figure it out by themselves. But then there will be a 9th book at the end that's the prequel, where you can actually see what happened to start all of this. And so I guess 9 books in the end.
Is it okay to ask maybe what could people who read this book expect from the next book?
So the next book deals a lot with self-medicating, as well as accepting or rejecting help that's available around them. And so I look really heavily into that. So you have some of the characters that are like, no, 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 I'm fine. I'm here to help you. I'll figure this out on my own. You don't have to worry about me. You have other characters where they're just like, I'm just going, especially Ferdinand is like, no, 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 I will figure this out myself. And they end up self-medicating, just trying to find something that works for them. You have some characters like, yes, I'm here. Please help me. And so you get to see a little bit of how different people go about that seeking help or accepting help sort of level.
So in this world, there can be said then that although there are thoughts or behaviors or disorders that aren't considered proper, there is still characters that are willing to kind of reach out um, and
Yes.
help deal.
Yes, and it's one thing like reaching out, and so grief is perfectly normal. Trauma, when you experience something horrible, is normal, but like the mental illness, hearing voices is not a proper thing, and you know, being depressed or desiring death is not a normal thing. It's not proper, and so they will try and help, thinking, oh well, he's grieving, or oh well, there's a trauma thing going on, and so they don't fully understand. And so there's a little bit of trying to help but not understanding how to help, as well as those who just like, yes, I lost my family and I need someone to talk to. And so you get both those who understand what someone needs and is able to give the proper help, and those who aren't, even
Right.
though they want to. Um, yeah, as well as I was like, I don't have the right to grieve. I don't have the right to bother or burden anyone, and so I'm just going to stay away and hope no one tries to help me because it's not their place to help. And so
Yeah. And for those of you just joining us, we're talking about the world building and the world within the book. We're not actually saying it's not proper to grieve those ways, but
it's like,
more how the characters feel like they can interact. This is maybe like a bit of a shift in gears, but there's quite a diversity of character names in your book. There's just one that comes up is the Zhao for kind of like Chinese. Is that an intentional, or was it just, you know, oh, this is kind of just how I experience the world, so of course there would be this diversity?
Mostly intentional, but I love diversity. I've been in places where it's like all white middle class and it's not the same in any way as just the joy and the experience that you get being around people from different cultures and, you know, different places of birth, different uh, areas in life and whatnot. So I do enjoy diversity. I wanted to have that in my book, but mostly what I did is like, okay, this happens, many millennia in the future, and I have an idea of the history that got the world to that point, even though it never really comes up. But you have to develop your world.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so considering the population base that we have now and how they're projecting different countries and groups are like birth rates and declines and whatnot, how would that then translate after all these different events happened within the timeline that I thought of? And it's like, well, a vast majority of people will be Asian or of Asian descent. There's a huge number of East Indian, and African, and different things like Latinx and whatnot, like much more than other groups. And so when you get to this world, it's like, okay, you have a lot of people who will have black or dark hair and black or dark eyes just because genetically, with the intermarriage and mixing of the world, these are the traits that are going to become more prominent, more common, along with the names and uh, just all that kind of fun stuff. I also kind of looked a little bit at the evolution of names. So there are some names like John. John is a really simple name, and it's pretty much thought of as European style type name. But there's also, because it's so simple, it could easily develop in other languages and then be perpetuated. And so I was trying to find names like that could be fun, and then just have a couple of random ones like, okay, yeah, that's throwing back to just solid traditional. Apparently, it never went away because there are names like that.
So you kind of brought up, and I'm just like fascinated. I can't believe, like, like we're one of the first people you've talked to, because a lot of the questions I want to ask you, often I think authors get tired of hearing the same things. But because it's more fresh, it's just very exciting, to kind of get a chance to poke at some of those questions. And I'm curious, how do because you've written your world, you said, that's kind of part of world building, even if it doesn't get into the book. How do you reconcile then the parts that are only to you, and then the parts that are kind of reflected to the audience? How do you kind like decide, like, what do you cut out, and then, like, to keep things making sense, I guess?
Part of it is how it's presented within the world. So, like, with Zhao, not Zhao, with Zafir, he he uses sign language while he speaks because, and it's hinted at a little bit or mentioned briefly near the middle end, where his manservant, his tutor and protector, taught him that language. It's his or his primary language. And so, like, within my world, okay, there was sorry, I have like random words come out. There's an area where there's a large population that uses primarily sign language or other like nonverbal languages. But instead of, here's this whole history of it, it's like, okay, Zhao just uses it. I talk about his hands moving and the different, and we'll describe some of the different gestures he does as he speaks. And it's just normal. No one thinks anything of it. It's like, oh, yeah, so that's just how it is. And so that's how I try to do it with a lot of these. Like, oh, yeah, well, this is just normal. Why would I even really mention it? Or why would I be surprised by it? It's just there. I find I really enjoy that immersive style of storytelling when I read other people's, and so that's kind of what I went with this.
No, I love that. It's interesting to hear how the things that you read and then the way that it translates to the things that you write. Because you mentioned you also don't love when people break down all the little details of, of characters. So it's definitely not in your book the over the top descriptive, kind of Robert Jordan dwells on
But that's
paragraphs at a
definitely one
time.
way of doing it.
It totally is, and I think for some books it's necessary. I agree. I think in this story it would be kind of like that's crazy, or why. But I wonder to what extent then outside of the book is the world building. Do how far and in depth do you go that
uh,
the reader maybe doesn't see?
oh, in my mind. So like I have done world building like starting from now. It's like, okay, so if starting today, if I just what one event could trigger the next event that needs to go to the next event, just kind of go on and on and on. And I do this because I guess I'm a little masochistic, I don't know. But um like how a toddler always asks why? It's like, well, why? Well, why? And so I'm okay, so why would this happen? Okay, so for this to happen, this needs to happen. Well, why would this happen? I just keep on going back and forth until I've developed this world and the history and the characters and the societies to a point where it makes sense that it ended up this way. At least makes sense to me, because if it makes sense to the writer, then that continuity stays within the story, making it more enjoyable
That's
for me.
wonderful. Yeah, I mean it's great because it's you have I think these kind of realistic takes on the modern and how it kind of progresses. It's also cool to hear how you break down like population and how that would affect then the nature of names. And for those of you that do pick up the book, I really love there's like kind of a glossary in the front, which is helpful because it even kind of talks about pronunciations of names that we see in our modern time. To bring it up again, like the Chinese, the proper Mandarin, at least that I know of. I don't know what the Cantonese would look like, but version of the names in your story. Do you, when it comes to the way that you've broken things down, like in the world that those people live in, do you have things even down to minute like religion or a character's personal traits, or how do you kind of keep those things together, or does it just naturally come to you as you're writing? You feel like you already know those characters.
So like definitely by this point, it's just all natural to me because I've already gone through that process. But there was a lot of, okay, this character does this, but why would they do that? And so I would figure out their history that would lead them to do that and what would put them in that position. Um, like a big thing when I first started this story, Ferdinand wasn't even thought of.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it was like I was focused on Oya, and I'm like, okay, Oya this and Oya this and Oya this. And I realized, okay, well, I liked this not knowing the common language. And so it's like, who I needed someone who was not popular, who was socially awkward and quiet, but good with languages, who was more than happy to sit down quietly with her and be like, okay, I'm going to learn your language so I can teach you mine. And I'm like, okay, so what what would he be? And like, I figured him out a little bit. It's like, okay, he's just kind of this nerdy science guy who loves to invent things and just happens to be really good with languages. And it's like, okay, well, why would he be like this? Why would he be this timid? Why would he always think or say these things? Especially with his not being good enough. Like, why is she here with me? Why wouldn't she find someone who's better at this? Um, and so I eventually realized or discovered his, you know, history from birth and what sort of events and family members and interactions and stuff led him to be that way. And as I was doing this, I realized the story was about him and not about Oya, which blew my mind. I'm like, how did this even happen? But I'm glad it did. Like, I really love Ferdinand. It's just like every time I sit down, I'm like, this poor kid, what am I doing to him?
Yeah. Does it ever feel, as the author that a little bit, I don't know what the right description would be. Does it ever feel tormenting to kind of put your characters through that? Does it ever feel, I guess, like you relate to them on a real level, or is it easy to just kind of say, well, they're not real, so it's.
Definitely a little bit more on the I am such a horrible person for doing this. Why am I even thinking to do this to this character, especially like the ones that you just can't help but love, like, LB and Zhao and just the ones where they're just these cute characters. You're like, how could you do that to them? Like, what sort of monster am I? But yeah.
You're a writer with a psychology degree. I think anyone would eventually go to that level. No, yeah, and thank you also. I feel like the way that I'm giving you these questions are not intuitive, but you're answering it exactly as like what I have in mind. So
Oh,
thank
thank
you
you.
so much. But when I'm wondering, we're kind of headed into 2021. When do you think that we might see your next book come
I'm
out, the next one in the series?
I'm currently in the process of cleaning it up and getting it ready to send to the editor. Um, from that point, it kind of depends on how busy they are with other books, but it should definitely be out by the end of 2021. It'd be really cool to get it out a little sooner, but it's also I want to have it out at least within a year of the first one, but I also want to make sure it's like done well so it doesn't get rushed out too soon. So anytime between mid and late 2021 is going to be my guess.
All right. No, that's awesome. We still have about 10 minutes today. People, I think, enjoy when we kind of get to know you a little bit personal, but playfully. So we kind of have these 2020 like lightning round questions. So thank you, Gray, for starting this. But if it's okay with you, we just have like a couple kind of like little get to know you.
Sounds fun.
All right. So, one of the things that I was curious about, um, what other reads would you suggest right now to people?
Ah, there's so many books that I love. Um, I know right now really enjoying. It's actually a light novel series called My Youth Romantic Comedy As Wrong as I Expected. Like if you love stories that just like natural progression of characters and relationships and really kind of delves deep into the emotions and behaviors and motives, like that one's a really fun one. And there's an anime, so
The name of that one more time?
My Youth Romantic Comedy As Wrong as I Expected.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
think from the title already.
Yeah, it's so beautiful and it's funny. And like the main character, I'm like, if I had known him in high school, we would have been two peas in a pod. It would have been awesome. Um, Another one, like a lot of it depends on kind of what you enjoy. Like I really love the artistic value of A Slow Regard of Silent Things. Like that
Oh,
was that was the first book I was able to actually sit down and read after my head injury, and so I was so excited because it's just beautiful and it's definitely not traditionally written, and so not everyone will love it, but it's if you're just looking for beauty and connecting on a emotional level, that's a great way of doing it. Um, Oh, what are some of the A Monster Calls? Anyone who has not read the book A Monster Calls, you need to find the version with the pictures and read it. It will make you cry. It is beautiful and amazing. Uh yeah, there's just so many. I'm trying to just think of there's like what are some of the others? Oh, there's one if you like a really funny one that twists the whole D&D story type thing. It's called M- Goblin Quest. And it's actually a trilogy. There's like Goblin Quest and Goblin Hero and Goblin another one, and it's hilarious and just fun. So
I think Goblin Quest was actually in our prize draw from last year, but I never read it.
it's funny. It's definitely worth it. It's just a cute little read.
Also, I think that you're the first person that's ever actually recommended a Pat book on this stream, which is kind of funny that I think about it.
So it's
Okay.
just amazing. I'm like, who else can write a chapter on making soap? And it's just beautiful. And it's like the brazen gear, and you're just like, oh, that brazen gear. And you're just like,
Not to pressure you, I did have a question from chat. Somebody asked, is there a fiction that you feels is psychologically accurate?
a fiction. Ah,
Or a nonfiction? No,
a trope type thing.
yeah, I'm wondering if they maybe.
Trying to think, like, there's so many tropes and so many just fun storytelling things. And of course, my brain is going completely blank. Oh
Oh
no.
no, that's okay. I mean, Behind Closed Doors is a good book, guys. It's written. Read that one first. Okay, let's go with the easy one too. We can come back to that if you want.
Yeah. If it pops into my head, I will. I'm like, there's so many that I love and some that just drive me nuts, but like, there are definitely some good ones.
Yeah, somebody also asked Kareem Shah if they could, or Kareem Shah if they could unpack what they mean by fiction. But I am curious if you had like one drink right now in front of you, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, what is your favorite?
Matcha tea.
Really?
Yeah, it's delicious. I love how rich it is, and it gives just a little bit of that caffeine boost without being like this hard up and then a hard crash. And it's just nice and soothing to drink.
I think I should try that because I don't know what it is about matcha, but I just haven't really gotten into it, but the smell is amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
if you do try it, just put a tiny bit of liquid in the powder and then get that all mixed up and then pour in more liquid. Like, don't try to put in the full amount of liquid and then mix it up because you'll be sitting there mixing forever. So, like, form a little paste first.
do you do yours with milk?
I do mine with almond milk.
Okay.
It's
Well, I
really
have almond
yummy.
milk in the fridge, so
Hey, there you go.
uh, okay, so they said I phrased that wrong. They meant novels or short stories you feel properly explore psychological issues. They keep being disconnected from their internet. Okay, so yeah.
Okay, so, there was one I read. Oh, what was it? Like, A Monster Calls, definitely. That one was done beautifully. It was impressively accurate with how a child would be affected trying to go through daily life while watching their mother um, deal with cancer, and that was just, yeah, that one was beautifully accurate. There are a couple others I've read
Can
and I
I
can't think of
ask
them. Sorry.
what in what no, I'm sorry. I asked you the question and interrupted you. I am curious though, within psychology, what is your either specialization of your degree or like what did you pursue within psychology, or is it just broad?
I did clinical, so it was more focused on the intense, cannot really be serviced out in like within the public. Like, it usually requires hospitalization or long-term care at a facility. So not a regular sit-down counseling sort of everyday issue type thing. That makes sense.
And I feel like people in the, no, it's no, that's amazing. I think people in the chat are probably gonna be like, Zay, you suck at this lightning round because I have like 800 questions. But okay, this is one that Gray always asks that I think is amazing. If you could have any person, alive or dead, to just sit down and have a conversation with, who would you choose?
Harry Pratchett.
Oh, that's such a good one.
He is just hilarious and so brilliant. Like, I wish I could write stories in such an amusing and just amazing way. His characters are awesome, and he just looks like he's having so much fun in all the little movies and shows he appears in. I'm just like, oh, he'd been amazing.
a living author who has a pretty like whimsical sense of writing. And I'm not going to say Neil Gaiman. I know everyone thinks I'm going to say Neil Gaiman. Besides Neil Gaiman,
Who is also a good writer.
who's also
like,
an amazing writer. We had on Kevin Hearn, who is author we work with, also has some lovely little kind of punny and like whimsical writing styles that I think that y'all would like. Um, but so somebody said I'm going to say Pat Rothfuss. Who even is that? Some guy. No. All right. Wait. Coming from the chat, anything that y'all want to ask our author? We have 3 more minutes left. Shoot them at us. Until then, it can be a lightning round question, by the way, guys, or a, I guess, in just interest question in general about you or your book. But thank you for being here. I had 800,000 questions that I could have asked you, and it's really hard to put them all into an hour.
Yes.
But yeah, and thank you for dealing with my awkward interview style.
Hey, it worked well for me. If you had been like super on like traditional, I would probably been like, there are words in my head. I'm not sure how to get them to my mouth.
Okay, wait. Oh, we have some. Okay, what is your favorite comfort food?
Chocolate. Like dark chocolate, as close to 100% as you can get. Like the
Oh, really?
bitter, darker, the better. Yeah, I was raised on dark chocolate. That's
So if you go to your house, we're gonna find you eating Baker's chocolate powder out of.
not the powder, but I have eaten the Baker's chocolate like
Oh boy,
melting. It's I like bitter things, and so for me, it's delicious. Even though for most people, it'd be like,
Somebody asked, "Do you have a favorite word?"
Oodles.
That's in the intro to your book.
It's like I love you, oodles. Like, oh, this is oodles and oodles of fun, and we don't use it enough, but it's just so fun to say.
It's a good book. Or I mean, it's a good word. God damn, I'm horrible at talking. Okay, somebody says, "What's something in your office that you have there that people might be surprised that you have?"
Let's see.
I see some stuff in the background that I'm curious about. One is that fancy top hats that you got going on there.
Yeah, all 3 of those I actually made.
What?
Yeah, I love to craft, and so this is like our book craft writing room. And so like I have beads
goodness.
and I have power tools and resin. I love to work with resin. I'll do pretty much. I'm a jack of all trades of crafters. It's like, oh, that looks interesting. I wonder if I can do it, and then I try. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, just somebody said in the chat, "Oh, casually. Oh, I just made those," and they're amazing looking.
Yeah, and it's actually you would never guess, but it's like foam and fabric. So.
Oh, really? Okay. All right, I'm gonna have one question in here. I don't know if I would probably say neither if I had a choice all the time, but somebody asked Star Trek or Star Wars.
Oh, Star Trek. I was born and raised on Star Trek. I mean,
Oh,
don't get me
really?
wrong. I do like a number of the Star Wars, but like as a kid, Dad would watch Star Trek on Sunday and I would just roam in and watch it with him. And then I was a Trekkie before being a geek was socially acceptable. So I still loved it. So.
Well, that's amazing. We're at 1 o'clock. Thank you for going on my awkward interview journey with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
But yeah, one more time, you can get, I'm putting a C.R. Saxon's book, Behind Closed Doors, link in the chat. Check it out. It's really amazingly written. You go over topics that are really heavy and really important, and they're super easy to relate to. So thank you for being here, and thank you for making such a wonderful piece of writing.
Thank you. I was like, you're the first person to thank me for that. I hope it does help people because, I mean, it's what I love to do. Anything that can help bring any sort of peace or understanding or improvement is so important, especially right now. So,
And where can people find you one more time? If you have a
see,
Twitter?
yeah, it's easiest to find me on Twitter. It's just CR Saxon. I think there's an underscore between CR and Saxon, or maybe some. Now I don't remember. It's like, but if you type in CR Saxon, you'll see my picture, the same one that's on the little decal for the interview for this.
Yeah, I threw it in the chat. You also have a YouTube channel. You guys can find the link through her Twitter, and also here is a link in the chat. I don't know why I said Twitter, but yeah, we have a special word that helps us sign off. Viva la Moose!
Viva la Moose!
All right, there it is.